Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the winners and the losers from this past week. Somehow the college football fans were on both sides of it. I would argue they were more winners than losers, but there was a lot of confusion. I'll put it that way, and figuring out if your team is really good, if your team is really bad, or somewhere in the middle is about impossible to figure out right about now. But let's get into this week 2 whip around. There are a ton of games that we did not get a chance to get to and just want to touch on because they're going to have an effect one way or the other in conference races, in the playoff race, everything in between. So I want to make sure that I get into these, and I want to start with a game that did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. Cal gets a big-time win at Auburn, 21-14. I thought this game was dangerous for Auburn, but at the end of the day, I did not think it was going to go this direction, where the player that I thought was going to take over this game just did absolutely nothing. But Auburn falls back, and it's one of those things that everyone's looking at Peyton Thorne. He had 5 turnovers, had 4 interceptions within that. He was bad in this game. There's no doubt about that. And the questions have obviously arisen about why didn't he go out and get a transfer portal quarterback from this past cycle. And frankly, I understand that. I understand the frustration from Auburn fans watching what they watched and saying, we could have gone and gotten at least someone that's a little bit better, that can give us a little bit better of a chance to win. The thing is, they are not just a quarterback away. They need so much more than just a quarterback to get this team where they want to go. So I still think Hugh Freeze did the right thing. I still think using Peyton Thorne this year and then taking a big-time swing in 2025, which if they don't do that, then I'm fully on board with getting mad at Hugh Freeze for that decision-making. But they got to take a big-time swing in 2025. I think 2024 was always going to be a tough year, even if they had Cam Ward back there, if I'm being totally honest. But at the end of the day, I think they probably made the right decision. But on the Cal side of things, I talked about this game going into it, and I said Cal had the best player on the field, and that might be the difference maker in this game. And it was Jaden Ott, and I still stand by that it was Jaden Ott. But he had 10 carries for 11 yards. He had no fingerprint on this game by any means, but Fernando Mendoza absolutely did. Played really, really good football throughout this game, made every play that you needed him to make, and although there were moments that the offense didn't look all that great, when they needed that one play, he definitely did make it. So a huge win for Cal. It's one of those that I think they're going to be a relatively up and down team in the ACC this year, but this is a confidence booster. You just walked into Auburn Stadium, into Jordan Hare, and got a big-time win. So it's one of those things that maybe this is what Cal needed. Maybe they have enough athletes in to make some things interesting in the ACC. And as for Auburn, they're going to be an up-and-down team. They're going to lose some games like this one that you do not expect them to lose. They're going to win 1 or 2 that you do not expect them to win. I can almost promise you that, and it's going to be one of the more fun teams to watch throughout the year. I can definitely promise you that, both from the bad and the good side of things. But moving on, South Carolina just took Kentucky to the woodshed in this game, and it was absolute domination from the South Carolina defense. And it started with the 2 edge rushers, as well as Nick Emanwari. I believe I got that right. Apologies if I didn't. But Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart are special. Dylan Stewart, I'm having a hard time talking myself out of him playing in the NFL tomorrow. He is someone that the moves that he makes on the outside should not be possible by an 18-year-old. It is outright ridiculous what he's doing on that football field, and they were all over Brock Vandagriff and Gavin Wimsatt. And if you know anything about Gavin Wimsatt, the fact that he got in this game is an indictment on Kentucky's offense. It shows you just how bad it was in this game, but they had 5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss in this game. They were all over these quarterbacks, and Brock Vandagriff, I believe, had less completions than sacks. So just to give you an idea of where everything sat for Kentucky this past weekend. So Kentucky has real issues, had less than 200 yards in this game, only had 6 completions all day for 44 yards. It was ridiculous. It was absolute domination from the SC defense, and they got a lot to figure out. But South Carolina, you feel really good going into that big game against LSU this upcoming weekend, and cannot wait for that matchup between those edges and those tackles. But we'll get to that when we break down that game. BYU was able to knock off SMU in Dallas this past weekend. This was another one that I liked BYU to cover. I liked SMU to win, but SMU has all types of issues that they have to figure out. The quarterback situation is about as close to being figured out as it was in week 0. It is all over the place. They have no earthly idea how they're going to rotate these guys in, what the packages look like, how they're going to keep these defenses off balance. it's all over the place. Right now, it's an absolute disaster in Dallas, and they got a lot of things to figure out because right now they're leaving a lot on the table. This is a talented team that has R.J. Maryland, that has 4 running backs that, frankly, I think can contribute in a number of different ways. They have so many things that they can be capable of doing, and they're leaving it all on the table because of bad coaching, because of bad play calling, because they're making really bad just mental errors in general. So this is a team that is being held back just by really coaching more than anything else. You have to be able to figure out which quarterback gives you the best chance to win and stick with that quarterback. I understand both these guys are very talented. You are not going to win if you're rotating these guys in and out on drive-to-drive basis. That's just never going to happen in college football, especially when neither of these quarterbacks are outright elite. They're very good quarterbacks. They're quarterbacks that are very capable. They're not Quinn Ewers. They're not Carson Beck. So you need to make sure that you find your guy, you call the offense for that guy, and don't call some mix of an offense that makes everyone very confused. But moving forward on that Friday night as well, Duke got a big-time win in double overtime over Northwestern, and this was a fun one. It was very, very weird, but it was a fun one. But to start the second half, it was really gross. It went punt, missed field goal, interception, and fumble. It was terrible early on, and then things got a little bit going. Duke was able to put together a 2-minute drill to send this thing to overtime, and then we had 3 touchdowns in 7 plays. They were going at it early on in the overtime, but at the end of the day, Northwestern came up just a little bit short on their final drive. It felt like Malik Murphy found a little bit of a groove late in this one, and some of that is he's very comfortable throwing those, timing passes that you do a lot in the red zone, but I do think this is a very talented kid, and if he can get rolling, then maybe Duke is a team that you have to think about just a little bit more in the ACC. Not necessarily saying they're going to make a run for the title, but when they face off against these big-time teams, maybe they can nip their heels just one time throughout the season. Pitt staged a big-time comeback over Cincinnati, outscoring them, I believe, 15-0 in the fourth quarter. Just absolute domination for Pitt towards the end of this game. They were down 27-6, and then Eli Holstein just took over. They had touchdowns, or they scored the final 22 points of this game, had touchdowns of 38 and 56 yards. Just incredible performance towards the end of this game and a huge missed opportunity for Cincinnati. The good news for Cincinnati is Dante Corleone was back in this game, had 6 tackles, had 1 sack, was a very, very talented kid, one of the best defensive tackles in the country, and was dealing with blood clots early on in the season. Very glad to see him back on the field and healthy, and he's the beast that we always knew he was. So incredible performance from him, but Cincinnati definitely wants this one back. Virginia also staged a big-time comeback, winning 31-30 over Wake Forest. This one was wild, and Anthony Colandrea, whenever he steps on the field, it tends to get a little bit wild, that is for sure. There are a number of different things that happen throughout this game. I think when you talk about Virginia being able to stick in this game, it was very, very tough for them to stay in this game, partly because Anthony Colandrea threw 2 picks that led to 10 points for Wake Forest. So usually that's not a recipe to stick in a game, but they did just enough to stay around for long enough to where they just needed a couple of big plays in that fourth quarter to make a win. Now, neither of these teams are going to make a run at the ACC title. I feel very confident in that. Both have big-time holes and are going to have to play some really good teams down the stretch. But again, these are teams that could make some noise at some point. Anthony Colandrea is one of those guys that is that, bipolar type quarterback where you get one week you get just the worst quarterback play you've ever seen. The next week you get just magic. And I cannot wait to see where that happens. But again, these are teams that might not have the most to say about the CFP or about their conference race, but they might have something to say on a given Saturday. Michigan State got a big-time win, 27-24 over Maryland. This was a weird one, and Aiden Childs, just turn on Aiden Childs. He's one of those guys that if you're not a huge fan of any specific team, if you don't necessarily care how great the football looks, this is the guy. He threw 3 touchdowns, had 3 picks in this game. He is as fun as it gets. He is the Jameis Winston of college football as of right this second. But the story coming out of this one is Nick Marsh. He was an incredible player on Saturday and a really, really good, another freshman wide receiver that is making some noise in college football. Had 8 catches, 194 yards, a touchdown. This is a star in the making, and the connection between him and Aiden Childs is going to be really special, not only this year, but moving forward to 2025, might be one of the best duos in the entire Big Ten. But this was big for MSU. They very much needed this win. Maryland was a team that I pegged them just a little bit better than Michigan State, but they're all in the same realm. So it's one of those things that when you play these games, it doesn't seem like it means that much, but when you can get up to number 5 in the conference rather than number 8, it's the difference between these games. So a big-time win for Michigan State and puts them in a much better spot going forward. Texas State took UTSA to the woodshed this weekend, and this was one of the more surprising things that I saw the entire weekend because going up to this game, the line was even. It was dead even. No one could decide who was going to win this game. And they probably should have picked Texas State because Jordan McLeod went to work. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground, 2 touchdowns through the air. He was incredible and made that UTS defense look really dumb most of the day. It was really impressive and one of those things that UTSA just got a huge boost to their CFP chances because that's beating another big-time Group of 5 team, showing that maybe the Sun Belt, if I'm correct. Yes, the Sun Belt is a little bit better than the American at the end of the day, maybe giving them a little bit of a chip over the American, which you very much might need at the end of the day. So a huge thing for both these teams. I think both these teams have a chance to make some noise, but as of right now, Texas State is sitting very pretty in the Sun Belt and has probably the best win in terms of Group of 5 against Group of 5. I'm not including NIU because that was obviously the best win, but when we're talking about inside the Group of 5, this might have been the most impressive performance thus far. Then we'll talk about Washington State just dominating Texas Tech. I talked about this game on Friday, I believe, and said this one could go to overtime again for Texas Tech, and I was wrong. Washington State was all over this team pretty much from the get-go, and Texas Tech has just a myriad of problems on the defensive side of the ball. But the biggest thing for me was John Mateer was not good passing the ball, but he was really good in this game. He went 9 for 19 passing the ball, 115 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT. If I had told you that, you would definitely tell me Texas Tech won this game. He also put up 197 yards on the ground. That's outright insane and something that, frankly, should just never happen for a quarterback. But I guess if Texas Tech is giving you those openings, you'll definitely take them. Texas Tech badly needs Taj Brooks back in the lineup. He is one of those guys that carries this offense when it does not have a lot going, and they did not have a lot going on Saturday. So they need to get this thing going. They need to get him back on the field because Baron Morton throwing the ball 58 times in a game is not a way you're going to win a game, just plain and simple. So getting that guy back, it might change things for Texas Tech, but right now it looks ugly for the Red Raiders. Mississippi State tried their best to come back in this game, but Arizona State gets a win 30-23 over Mississippi State, and this was a fun one. I think a lot of people turned this one off, and then maybe 10 minutes later turned it right back on because Mississippi State decided they had life, but the story of this game was Cam Scatabo. He had 33 carries, 262 yards. 33 carries alone is outright insane, but carried this offense top to bottom. There was no one else on that box sheet that had anything going on Saturday. So this is the guy that you're going to have to watch going forward. He was also the leading receiver in this game, so he was everything. He was truly everything for this team, and Mississippi State did have a shot late on in this game to make some noise, but didn't quite make the number of plays that needed to be made and really just dig themselves too big of a hole early on in this game. But shout out to Kenny Dillingham. It's been a really interesting couple of weeks for Arizona State, and I haven't necessarily changed my opinion on them in terms of what they can do in the Big 12, but I have kind of changed my opinion in terms of what I think they can do to other teams. I think they are that team that could possibly, on any given Saturday, cause you problems because Kenny Dillingham calling plays with those 4 running backs that they have to play around with, things can get interesting in a hurry. They're going to need more from Sam Levitt going forward, but at the end of the day, I think they're a dangerous enough team to where you're going to want to definitely check out those games at the very least in the Big 12 going forward because they could totally ruin a season of a Utah or a Kansas State or an Oklahoma State sometime throughout this season. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about all of the questions from Week 2, and I have a number of them. I have a question about Colorado and how Saturday might have just been the microcosm of Deion's Colorado. I want to talk about the Heisman candidates. I want to talk about some of the issues with evaluating transfer quarterbacks. A million different questions coming out of Week 2, and maybe we'll continue this into tomorrow, honestly, but we'll start with, I believe, 6 today, so stick around and we'll be right back with that.